Apologies, I've just received advice I was in the wrong account, so I am back live and I'll start all over again. So firstly, thank you very much for spending time this morning on Facebook Live, and apologies we switched our days from yesterday to today as a result of the work we've been doing with Rita and the other codes in relation to funding for the remainder of this racing season. Just as a general update, our move from level 4 to level 3, as you're well aware, has allowed us to recommence training around the country. A big thank you to all our trainers, owners, jockeys, track riders and stable hands for all your help and patience. Most of the questions that we received last week were focused on topics such as stake money, trial and racing programs. And I hope yesterday's announcement around the racing policy and can be found on our website, and also it addressed some of the questions from last week. And the key takeouts for us are that when we resume racing on the 3rd of July, we've been able to extend prize money to 14 runners. There'll be a stake money allocation of $15,000 for every race meeting for the 13 race meetings. And also there'll be no noms and acceptance fees if your horse starts. So there's some two bits of... so just to recap, there's $15,000 for every race across the country conducted in July. We're spreading the prize money across more ownership groups, and there's no acceptance fees or nomination fees for the horses that start. This is a start, and as more information comes to hand, we'll be providing information to the industry more broadly. But we're happy that we've got a start, we're out there, we've got a stake money level, we're working with our different industry bodies, and that's really important for us as we resume racing in this critical period. Another issue that was raised with us last week was on the group of trainers we contacted to understand where their horses were at, what horses would come back into work, and likely resume to racing when they'd be available. Well, I'll have to apologise. That take nothing personal. We are trying to find ways to keep talking to trainers, and what we do each week on a Tuesday, the 4 stakeholder groups, being the trainers, jockeys, owners and breeders, we give them an update, and emanating from that last meeting, we've agreed with the Trainers Association to conduct a survey of all their members. So that'll be coming out over the next week to 10 days, and once again that'll help inform us on the number of horses that are coming back into work and the likely timeframes of when they'll be available to race. Now let's get into some questions. Firstly, Paul has asked us if it would be possible to have open nominations for the races in July where horses would be nominated for their preferred racing distance, and then the Bureau was able to split the nominations into race bands for the horses available. Paul, it's a really good question. This is what we've proposed in our racing policy for our return to racing, and we're in the process of working this through with our different working group, including trainers. From Pam. Pam, can Bernard reassure owners that there will be a fair and equitable stake money distribution of what may be available? Well, I think, Pam, we've answered that question with the stake money announcement yesterday to recommence racing on the 3rd of July, with the $15,000 prize money allocation every race meeting for the 13 race meetings across July. Shane has asked us, wants to know whether jockeys from Christchurch would travel to Southland to ride on a race day, and he also wants to know what tracks would be used for race days in Southland. Well, in the ramp up, Shane, we're going to Invercargill in July, and as far as the jockeys are concerned, there's nothing stopping jockeys travelling as it is a workplace. They're travelling to their workplace. But obviously any travelling from Christchurch to Invercargill would be a personal decision that jockey would make. Michael's asked us if Wednesday's conference call doesn't justify the questions, and I think Michael's referring to yesterday's call, raised by the industry trainers and others, will you make an approach directly to the Racing Minister, Winston Peters? If not, why not? Michael, I think what's really important at the moment that we work together as an industry. Rita and the 3 codes need to be working together through this unprecedented time, and we've been able to do that, and we'll debate issues amongst all those groups as we go forward. But what's really important today is that getting announcements out and giving the industry across the three codes some guidance on funding levels, prize money levels, so we can get our people back to work, back training their horses. So we feel that is the main priority. Now, I'm not going to answer the question a bit more directly, Michael. As many of you may be aware, the industry structure has been under review for some time. You're aware that John Massara came to New Zealand and did his report. The results of those reports have been now progressed to Parliament. We've been very lucky. We'll have two bills that will go through in 15 months to help restructure racing. That first bill went through in July last year, and the second bill on other parts of the restructuring of the racing industry are currently before Parliament, and this still remains a priority for the government. So we're hopeful over the next couple of months that we'll get some finalisation and announcements from the government on this second bill, which is both the bill from last July and the bill that we'll have hopefully by this July are important foundations to restructure the industry longer term. So good question, Michael, and I hope that if it doesn't fully answer, because I haven't got all the answers in terms of when we'll finally know the outcome of the time frame of the second bill, but the foundations and the time frame are there to restructure the industry. Peter has two questions relating to the calendar for 2021. Rita says its dates committee determines the annual race dates calendar, but it does consult each code on this. Its chairman also stated there'll be less venues used for racing in the future. Peter's asked, what does this mean for next year's calendar? Should clubs who race on their own course only once a year start to look at whether they're still going to be possible or even appropriate? Well, it's a good question, Peter, and in the middle of this global pandemic and even prior to this, we all knew the industry structure needed to change. And we do need to deal with the reality given the state of the industry, as I said, pre and post-COVID. There are significant issues with the number of venues across New Zealand that we had prior to the lockdown. So NZTR has consistently stated that there is a place for every club, and we have encouraged clubs to objectively work together in regions to build regional solutions. What we need to do, and it is a work in progress, it started last year and we'll also address it over the coming months, we need to provide an appropriate balance about taking racing to the community, building on venues close to horse population, building venues that can attract not only today's customer but to the customer of tomorrow, and getting the economics of the industry appropriately structured that we can deliver future prize money allocations and investments into our clubs. Ultimately, wagering drives the outcomes for the industry. And without wagering, we can't pay prize money, we can't pay clubs. So it's really important that we look to continually grow the wagering income for the industry. So those clubs, we've had a principal position that every club must has a role to play. The number of venues we've had, we did have 48 venues in the 18-19 season. This year we had 41. And those discussions around what the structure of the industry looks like is a discussion that will need to take further action. You've seen, and as you've said, seen written by Rita and by us, the number of venues is unsustainable. So we need to work together to find the right footprint for New Zealand racing, both for today and the future. Kirsty has asked, with the cash flow problems of the business, do you anticipate synthetic tracks for the CD and the South Island to be shelved? NZTR still believes the right strategy is to have synthetic track racing in the CD and the South Island, but that's all subject to funding, and consequently that's an ongoing piece of work that the codes and Rita will work on with the government. Michael raises a really good point around stable employees and asks, why haven't we sent any relevant information to stable employees about their obligations during this pandemic? Michael, we took this on board, you raised it online, and in the next 24 to 48 hours we'll be emailing all stable employees on our database to provide them a contact point. So thanks for raising that question. A question from Frank. If there are fewer race meetings, why wouldn't stakes money rise? Our funding for stakes is determined by the amount of money that is generated by RETA and the TAB. Our announcements yesterday are part of a resuming phase of racing during a global and a financial crisis. And what's really important, and I keep emphasising this, and I probably can't emphasise this enough, the government, RETA and the codes understand there is a need for change, which will ultimately lead to improving the industry we all love. But we can only do that by working together. We can't have silos going off and doing different things and wanting different outcomes. And we're not going to agree on everything. But what's really important, that we pull together for the long-term benefit of New Zealand thoroughbred racing. So thanks, Frank, for the question. I hope that's gone some way to answering it. Carl asks why some of the clubs we're expecting to race in July are stating that their websites that they'll be closed-door meetings, and wants to know why the public won't be able to attend. It's a good question, Carl, and I'm working on the basis that our clubs are being very cautious at the moment until we know exactly what alert level we'll be at by the time we go back racing. Under what we've seen that the government has announced, under level 2, there'll be gatherings allowed of 100 indoors and 500 outdoors. And that's something we'll take advice on and work with our clubs on going forward. But as soon as we get a clear indication on that, we'll certainly provide update information. Wendy wants to know what restrictions are there on transporting horses between regions. Can they be moved interregionally to training establishments or studs or between islands? Another good question, Wendy. From NZTR's perspective, our protocols don't prohibit horse movements under level 3, so people can get Majestic and other freight companies to ship a horse long distance, including inter-island. Under level 3, people are restricted to moving only as far as their neighbouring region and only for work purposes. This doesn't apply to transport companies, of course, as previously mentioned. So just some other questions that have come in the last few hours. Tony wants to know, why are trainers only allowed to give horses one trial or jump out before racing? Trials will be programmed in the next few days. The idea behind this is that rather than horses trialling on multiple occasions, it's imperative that we get them back to race. And in addition, horses that have any behavioural issues, as recommended by the stewards, will be able to return to the trials. And the last update on that is that horses that have never raced or trialled can have 2 trials or jump outs, as can 2-year-olds. So Tony, I hope that goes some of the way to answering your questions. Just had an update here again. Trials, we'll monitor trials feedback from trainers as we go along. So I think the important note here is, Tony, as with everyone on the call, we are trying new things and we need to be flexible. So as we talk to trainers, get feedback, and we get feedback from all other participants, we'll alter the model as we go forward. But please be patient. We are in the middle of a global pandemic. We're very fortunate, and with the absolute commitment of all our participants, it's great that we're back training and we'll be back racing before we know it. It's important that, there's no other sport at the moment of being able to ramp up like racing does. So we're really fortunate in that space. So we're all working together for the benefit of the industry to make sure that we can do this program of racing in the safest way possible. Question from a number of questions from Michael Pittman. Good to have you online, Michael. Any thoughts to retaining stakes across the board with increases for open, listed and group racing in the new season? That's a discussion that will be ongoing with our trainers, our ownership groups and our board. I mean, I think we've had some reasonably good feedback to date on having that flat stake structure at $15,000 a race across the meeting. So really keen. If we get overwhelming support, that's something we'll continue to look at. Next question from Michael. If we go back to COVID level 2, will Guineas races stay at Riccarton where they should be? We have horses are already shifting between islands. So Michael, that's something that, as we said, we'll make that final decision on the 1st of July when we've got certainty around, when we have certainty around the alert levels. And the next question is, can the 3 racing groups insist that Price Waterhouse? So, okay, Michael, these are all the questions around the cost of all the different industry associations. So what I can tell you, what's been, and we've only got this in the last 48 hours, every part of the Rita business, JCA business, RIU business and the 3 codes businesses have all taken 20% reduction in the costs of running their businesses. And that's going to be ongoing. So just to rest assured participants, there are cost-cutting measures right across the industry, and that's good. That's good news because that'll help us continue to invest in the industry. From Shane, re the $15,000 minimum stakes. Will this level be kept post-August? Okay, Shane, that's a question that I've just answered previously. We're trialling things through this period in July, and if we find through the feedback we get it's something that can work, well, it's something that will be considered. I think the important thing around a bit of innovation we've shown for the month of July is no noms and acceptance fees for horses to start, and also trying to spread that prize money across as many ownership groups as we can down to the 14th placed horse. So I think that's been a real positive, and the feedback we've had to date has been positive. Some other questions I've just got here from Michael. When will we get guidance on the post-July stakes? Well, that information will come to hand once Rita have done their work around costing out the program for 2020-21. So just to explain what happens there, Rita, the codes put what a calendar could look like, and clearly Rita have to approve those licences. But then what they do is Rita then costs that program in terms of broadcast costs and the staffing costs for all those meetings throughout the year, and then that's an input into their P&L, and out of that comes a funding model that the codes then make decisions on how that money is distributed. So we hope, in the consultation and the feedback we've had over the last few days with Rita, that through the middle to late May, we'll get a better understanding of what that may look like. But as that information comes to hand, we'll certainly share that with our participants, our trainers, our jockeys, our owners, our stable hands, and we'll give regular updates through Facebook Live. I think we'd like to continue this type of communication with our participants, which I think I've found really useful. Sitting in Wellington, you often can't get to talk to everyone. We do, the industry here through our racing bureau and our finance team take many calls from our trainers, whether it's about stakes payment, whether it's about racing programs, whether it's about money that has to be paid or money that's owed. All those things happen, but giving information around important initiatives like the one that was announced yesterday and other things that as we ramp up our racing, those things are really important, and we'll continue to use these platforms to provide information. Steve, $1.7 million in bad debts that NZTR has wiped out. No, we haven't wiped any bad debts out, Stephen. There are monies outstanding. There is a letter going out to all people in the industry that do owe money. What we have said, we understand it's difficult times for people. So those debts that are outstanding 90 days or more, we're happy to talk to you around how we can help. But ultimately, those debts have to be paid. So there is, Steve, there's no $1.7 million in debt. And we do encourage participants to pay their debts when they fall due. We don't want to be used as a bank, but because we have other people doing the right thing. So thanks, Steve. So just to clarify, I hope that clarifies that situation. Listen, I really thank you for the questions you've provided us yesterday and this morning. This is ongoing. Please, we'll continue to answer questions to the best of our ability. Sometimes we can't answer everything because we don't know everything. And given the pandemic we're in and the changing nature of not only what's coming out of government, but what's happening in front of us with the racing industry, we're not going to get everything right. So please bear with us. Really appreciate you reaching out. That's all the questions this week. We'll touch base next week. Please enjoy the week ahead and stay safe. Thank you.